Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stacking the Box. The Super Bowl is almost here. Iain, MacMillan, Sterling, Holmes. We are just going to go over the Super Bowl, give our thoughts, keys to victory, who we think is going to win, and all that stuff. Next week, if you haven't heard, we will be doing Stacking the Box live from Radio Row every day next week, except for Monday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Next week, we'll be live from Radio Row. Tons of great guests. We'll be live basically all day. So tune in for that. Make sure you are subscribed to Stacking the Box on YouTube so you can catch that. Next week is very fun, or will be very fun. So I figured since we have such a busy week next week, Sterling, we can just use this episode to give our full thoughts, who's going to win, keys to victory, until next week, because next week there's going to be news, there's going to be interviews, there's going to be all that stuff that we can talk about.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and say Chiefs because Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. All right, so this was Stacking the Box.
Pretty much.
No, you're right, and this is a good call because we'll be so busy. I hope everyone tunes in and follows along. Last year was an absolute blast down there on Radio Row. I'm so glad Ian's coming along this year. We needed a Chiefs hater who's now, I guess, a converted Chiefs hater to now a Chiefs truther on the squad. So we'll have fun. I'm glad he's going to because he owes me a lot of free stuff because I keep kicking his ass in every bet we've ever done. It's nice.
I would say still hater. I'm still a hater, but I'm not. It's just because I'm going to cheer against them. I'm not going to continue to say they're not as good as the record.
Hey, 10P Kids, he's a Bengals guy for those listening, says, wake me up when preseason starts. Loved you guys all year. See you then. Hey, appreciate it, 10P. I know it's hard right now where you guys are at. You've been so fun to hang out with all year long. You're my favorite Bengals fan I know, okay? You're my favorite one. Always appreciate you hanging out here. And I will also point out, last year, during Stacking the Box, we had on some really good Bengals players. We had on Orlando Brown Jr., who was outstanding. He is so much fun to talk with every single time. Jamar Chase. We had Jamar Chase live in person down there on Radio Row last year. And that was my favorite time up to talking to Lamar. I've had a couple of chances and opportunities to talk with him, but in person, you really got a good feel for him. The guy left with a newfound, greater respect and for the honesty of Jamar Chase. I think he sometimes gets a bad rap because I think he plays that somewhat villain role very well, and he's obviously very talented. So I will just go ahead and say, if you want to still tune in, there might be some Bengals players coming your way this year as well.
Yeah, well, I admit that I'm a Chiefs hater. I think you should admit that you're a Bengals hater. Do you agree with that? No.
I just gave a lot of credit to Jamar Chase, did I not?
You did, but you do kind of every time you get a chance to take a shot at the Bengals, you take a shot at the Bengals.
What are you talking about? I gave him a lovely endorsement right there. I said Jamar Chase gets a bad rap. Wow.
You are a Bengals hater. You are. You take as many shots as you can at the Bengals, and I think if you do talk to any members of the Bengals this year, I think you got to fess up, and I think you got to be honest with them. I talked to Drew Brees a couple weeks ago, and the first thing I said was that you are my number one enemy for 15 years.
Yeah, I told Sean Alexander that when he broke Priest Holmes' rushing touchdown record. So yeah, that's fair.
Okay,
I'm an honest man. I stand on business. STB dog.
So I want you to stand on business if/when you do talk to Bengals players next week.
I will do.
I know there's guys. I'm going to be standing on business. Maybe some former Patriots who I hated those teams even more than I hate the Chiefs. I'll be standing on business.
I love Hunter made sure to put the Bengals offensive line on my schedule when we're doing that. I love he put two offensive linemen for one me. That's going to be great. So that way when I talk smack, I'll get pancaked into oblivion.
Yeah. I've done it in Zoom interviews. It might be a little tougher for me to do it in person when I have to stare the person in the face 2 feet away from me, but we'll see. We'll see.
I won't even be a pancake. That'll be like a crepe. I'm too small. I'm not even big enough for a pancake.
Iain is the original Bengals hater, never forgetting the Stack in the Box episode after Jane. No, I actually like the Bengals, and I think even when that was going on, I thought I made it very clear I did actually like the Bengals. I have generally, in the past few years, been a guy who points out teams that I don't think are as good as the record, and the Bengals in that stretch weren't as good as the record. And it's been proven the past 2 years because they have not gotten back there. They've missed the playoffs 2 years since then. So.
Well, and by the way, to your point here, Ian, you've traditionally been pretty good at that, except for this year. I give credit where credit's due. As much as I like to rip on you and we have these fun bets, You nailed the Bengals. You nailed the Eagles last year. You were one of the first people I know who are on the, the Eagles might be talented, but it's not going to translate come postseason time. There's something different. You were right. This year, though, was maybe the first year you really had a miss in regards, and that was with the Chiefs, right? But you really changed your tune later on in the season. You kind of fessed up to maybe this time being wrong, but you had been right more than wrong in regards to your fraud rankings. I guess, was there a turning point in the season for you that you thought the Chiefs went from, in your eyes, not mine or a lot of folks, but in your eyes, from frauds to potential Super Bowl champions?
And Trevor is right to his credit. In that playoff game, I did pick the Bills. The Bengals won. And the Bengals do, at least when they get to the playoffs, they do have that little bit of ability to win games maybe they necessarily are outmatched in, where the Bills don't have that ability, and neither do the Ravens. I think what happened this year, Sterling, was that there wasn't a team that I truly felt was as fraud. Before, in the past 4 years, there's a team that sticks out to me halfway through the season. Last year, it was the Eagles. It was the Titans before. It was the Vikings before when they lost in the first round of the Giants. This year, I didn't really have that team. And I think even when I finally came out with a take and called the Chiefs frauds, even then I was like, yeah, but like you can't really do it. You can't really call the back-to-back defending champs the frauds because you know that they can turn it on. So I think what happened was I just kind of forced it because there wasn't a team that I felt that strongly about. I felt like I had to make a stand. And then when Nick Wright obviously brought up my tweet on his show and talk smack to me, then I felt like I had to just kind of, draw a line in the sand and go to war. So the turning point was actually probably right after I started calling them frauds. They actually played they started playing the best that they had played all season in like the last 4 weeks of the year. So, and then obviously, last week against the Bills and beating up on the Texans is I waved the white flag.
Yeah.
So hopefully next year there is a team that actually sticks out, and it's not the Chiefs, that I can go get back to being right about calling teams fraudulent. But this year I think I forced it when I didn't have to.
Yeah. By the way, shout out Trevor in the chat as well as Sportscaster89. Sportscaster89 can't wait for Media Row, guys. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Again, hopefully everyone gets to hang out and tune in and listen to a lot of fun interviews, some behind the scenes that we're lucky enough to have the opportunity to do. All right, I do want to talk about the Eagles here. I've seen some tweets go around recently, and I think we're having this either revisionist history or we're having this sort of trying to make this current iteration of the Eagles sound like they're so much better than the 2022 version. While I do think this version of the Eagles is better than 2022, I've seen people talk about how, the aging defensive line of Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox and all these older players. I'm like, that team had 70 sacks. That defense was historically great on the defensive line. Just because they were older doesn't mean that they were bad. I've seen a lot of people talk about how this new, younger iteration of the Eagles D-line is like a Maserati and the Ferrari. Well, yeah, they're younger, and yes, they might be quicker. Doesn't mean that they're better. I think where the Eagles defense is a lot better is actually in the secondary. James Bradbury, who for the most part was actually good during that 2022 season, he's no longer here, but the other cornerbacks have gotten a massive upgrade. With Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, I think that's the biggest upgrade. The linebackers, Zach Bond has been a revelation on that prove-it deal that he signed with Philly. I don't think it's the defensive line that they're better in. I think that's actually false. I know Jalen Carter is outstanding, but I think we're forgetting how good Fletcher Cox, as well as Brandon Graham, who was injured for this game, really was. I just think sometimes we have this revisionist history. And yeah, Sean says Javon Hargrave. I mean, that defensive line was potent in 2022. It's just a different roster construction. So I don't want to have that revisionist history. This defense and overall this team, I think, is better than 2022. But that 2022 team was extremely good as well.
Extremely good. And it's funny, actually, just as you were talking there, Sterling, I just very quickly just looked through some stats just to compare the 2022 team to this year's team. A lot of areas actually identical. Opponent yards per play led the NFL 5.5 in that 2 years ago. This year led the NFL in that stat 5.5. So not only did they both lead the NFL in that stat, both the exact same number. So yeah, a lot of similarities. But I think what people are really saying when they're saying this version of the team is better. I mean, you brought up the defense, but I don't think you can look past the Saquon Barkley addition.
Of
which to
course.
me is the biggest difference between the 2 years ago and this year's team.
Well, and I don't push back on that. I have no pushback if you want to talk about Saquon and maybe some of the weapons overall. To me, it was the people talking about the defense, and I don't know if it was trying to be used to diminish that 2022 championship, that Super Bowl by Kansas City. I just thought it was interesting. And Sean, our producer today, he says, he's a Philly guy, by the way. So me and him are having a nice, respectful conversation over the next week and a half. We're very respectful, of course. Sean says 2022 relied on pressure to help the shaky coverage. 2025 relies on good coverage to help get pressure. And that I agree with. That was just my main pushback when I saw people talking about the defensive line in particular. I thought that was a little bit, again, revisionist history just because they didn't get a sack against Kansas City. Say the field all you want. Both teams played on the same field. I just always hate excuses like that. One from Joshua in the chat right here says, last year's Niners team or this year's Eagles team? I said this year's Eagles team is the best team the Chiefs will have played in a Super Bowl. I think that Eagles team, that Niners team was probably second. I know some people might say Tampa Bay. That Tampa Bay team went, what was it, 9-8, 10-7?
They were definitely wild card for sure. I know the Saints won the division that year. Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, that team got hot, and that Chiefs team was decimated with injuries. No excuses, but I'm not putting that Tampa Bay team in the same realm, in my opinion, as last year's Niners team or this year's Eagles team. I just think these two teams back-to-back years will be the best two teams the Chiefs would have faced.
Last year's 49ers team, quietly actually were not very good defensively. Last year's 49ers team relied a lot on their offense, and it was the best offense in the NFL, but their defense, statistically, from a metric standpoint, were completely middle of the pack. So I think this Eagles team, this version of the Eagles, is going to be the toughest opponent for the Chiefs. Bucks were 11-5 in 2020, says Sean. Yeah, 11-5, but I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, they were a wild card team though. I think the Saints did win the NFC South that year. So, they weren't quite as dominant, but I mean, 11-5, still a good team. Trevor says, wasn't the DVOA for the Niners crazy compared to the Eagles? I don't know. I'd have to look into that, see if I can bring that up at some point this show.
Yes. A lot of it was, if you looked at what Aaron shots, which is DVOA, he even said that last year's Chiefs run and victory in the Super Bowl was the hardest stretch, in DVOA history. It was the Dolphins, who that was weather related. They were not built for that, but still you can't take that away. And then it was Ravens, Bills, and then it was obviously the 49ers. And historically speaking, that was just an insane stretch. That Ravens team was like sixth in NFL DVOA history. That Niners team may have also been top 10. It was just an absurd stretch for Kansas City, who did that on the road on the majority of the time, obviously. It was why that Super Bowl win last year was so damn impressive. This year's a little different, obviously. I don't know where this Eagles team ranks all time in historically speaking in DVOA. I just personally believe that this Eagles team is just slightly better than last year's Niners team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yes, almost simply defensively. Now, I would reverse this question back to you. Where does this Chiefs team rank amongst the Chiefs teams that have been in the Super Bowl the past handful of years?
Well, it's weird that 2022 season, 2023, when the Super Bowl was played year, right? So they're obviously going for a three-peat. If you want to say that particular team, that team I don't think was quite as good. Last year's team, the wide receivers were just brutal, right? They just were not good, but they were very good defensively, right? I think this year might be the most balanced, if you want to say most balanced team the Chiefs currently have. I think even running the football, they're effective, if not explosive. Weapons wise, this is probably the best we have seen in Kansas City outside of when the Chiefs had Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins, right? They're just a lot deeper, I think. But that's kind of been a hallmark of this Chiefs dynasty, is their depth. While other teams get injured, the Chiefs get injured too, but the reason why we don't hear that conversation as much is because they don't have a massive drop-off where it's a complete and utter black hole. The worst cornerback on the Chiefs this year was Najee Johnson. He's not been good, but he's not this absolute black hole. When the Bills lost Benford, what happened? Well, Kyer Elam had to go in the game, and that was just barbecue chicken. There's levels to this. Last year, when the Bills had injuries to Matt Milano, last year when the Dolphins had injuries to their linebacker group, their season was basically toast. The only time the Chiefs had really had that happen to them was when the Buccaneers Super Bowl, when they lost, was it 4 or 5 starting offensive linemen, their entire O-line. Right? That was the only time when the depth finally broke the camel's back. This Chiefs team, in my opinion, it's not just the stars of Patrick and Travis and Chris. It's the depth pieces as well. There are so many guys defensively that make an impact. It was Samaje Perine. It was Juju Smith-Schuster who had some of the biggest plays for Kansas City against the Buffalo Bills. The Chiefs are on their 4th left tackle this year. No one talks about that because they keep winning. So no one brings that up. No, I know you're laughing right now, but how many...
No, you're right. You're right. You're right. I'm not disagreeing with you. You're right.
No, but like Ian, how many teams go through on their 4th left tackle? They've been through 3 kickers this year. Harrison Butker's finally back, and nothing. They lost their wide receiver 1 to start the year, Rashee Rice. Like, they have all these things, and the Chiefs just keep finding ways to win. I know you're laughing. I get it, but like every other team uses that as an excuse. The Chiefs just find ways to win. It's next man up. And by the way, part of that is culture. I know you're laughing, but it's organization.
Come on!
It is though. It's organizational. It's organizational culture and depth. What happened? They had the opportunity to bring in a wide receiver, a veteran wide receiver. You know how many people wanted Deontay Johnson? Where did Deontay Johnson go, Ian? He went to Baltimore, where they won, and he complained. So he got shipped out. So then he goes to Houston, where they won a playoff game, and he complained. And then he was cut yet again. What did the Chiefs do? They brought in a veteran wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins. What has he done? Hasn't done a whole bunch, quite frankly, Ian. He's been just a guy.
He only played last week.
He had 1 reception on 2 targets.
Yeah, I think he only played 19% of snaps, something like that.
Yes, but what did he say after the game? He's thrilled. This is the happiest he's basically ever been playing football. He's playing for something. The Chiefs, again, I know it's a little thing, Ian. I know it sounds so silly and simplified, but the Chiefs, what they do, they value culture. I know it's dumb, and sometimes you're gonna miss on this. Sky Moore over George Pickens. George Pickens would not fit on this roster.
I'm calling timeout. I'm calling a 30-second timeout. The original question, Sterling, was compare this Chiefs team to the previous Super Bowl Chiefs team, and it just turned into you ranting about how great of an organization the Chiefs are. Where do they stack up with the other Chiefs teams? That's what I want to know. I get the Chiefs are the greatest organization of all time. Greatest head coach, GM, 18th tackle they're on, the millionth linebacker they're on. Nobody does it. No one gives credit to the Chiefs. They're a victim. I get it. They're the greatest team of all time. Where does this version of the Chiefs stack up to last year's version and the previous year's version?
It might be this year. I might say this year is the best, even if some of the analytical numbers don't represent it. I do think they may have coasted during the regular season just a bit. And when I say coast, I don't mean they don't care to win games. They clearly care to win games. But they're obviously able to turn it up a notch in the playoffs. It's weird because Travis has taken a step back, but Xavier Worthy has been a revelation at wide receiver. No Rashee Rice, but now Hollywood Brown is back. It's tough to determine because do you determine it the season long or do you determine right now as we're talking on January 29th when you do have Hollywood and Xavier healthy? When you do have Jalen Watson who is now back and healthy. That's big. Jalen Watson missed the majority of the season with an injury. That's their CB2. I think what we're finding out is this might be the best Chiefs team we have seen because I think it's the most just the most depth. This might be the most. How about this? They're the most well-rounded Chiefs team in the Patrick Mahomes era.
I disagree. I think this is the worst team the Chiefs have had. Now, I want to be very careful with what I'm going to say because I'm comparing this to other Chiefs teams. So Chiefs fans can't get mad because I'm not comparing this to any other team in the NFL and comparing this version of the Chiefs to last year's version of the Chiefs and the Chiefs of the year before. I think significantly when you compare this Chiefs team to the Chiefs team that beat the Eagles a few years ago, I don't even think it's close. The Chiefs team that year led the NFL in yards per play, led the NFL in EPA per play. They're like above average in those stats this year.
Sure.
I get what you're saying. They've been a little bit more injured this year. I get what you're saying with their depth this year. I'm not going to disagree with that, but I don't think we can, when we're comparing different iterations of the same team, I don't think we can just completely throw some of the numbers out of the window. And from a metric standpoint, they are the worst of all these teams.
I think their 2022 was probably better, or at least equal ground. And they were very healthy in 2022 for the majority of the season. They really were. That was a wild situation. I think this Chiefs team is better than last year's, though. And I know, again, some of the season-long metrics might not represent that, but if you're telling me at this point last year versus last year's team, I think this team wins, right? 2022, I think you have a really good case. A really good case. And if you go back to the first Super Bowl that the Chiefs won in the Patrick Mahomes era, the defense, I think, wasn't even close to this, right? Even the offense may have been more explosive.
That was like a completely different team.
Completely different team. They've turned over so many guys. Just defensively, that this is such a better defense than that first iteration. I think 2022 is the one team you could point at and say, sure, you can make a case for.
Okay, yeah, I think we can agree on that. And I would make that case. And Trevor agrees with me. He thinks the 2022 Chiefs are better. I would say the same thing. If you want to say that they're better than they were last year, I don't know if I'd agree, but I probably wouldn't argue against it. But compared to the 2022 team that faced the Eagles, I would say I think that team was better.
Which is funny because, by the way, 2022 was supposed to be the retooling year.
Yeah.
That was when they lost Tyreek Hill. Well, they traded Tyreek Hill.
Was Tyreek Hill on the team that lost to the Bengals in the AFC Championship?
Yeah, because there was 21 and then 22. They traded in that offseason 22. That was actually the draft pick of Trent McDuffie. That was the whole thing. They traded up ahead of the Buffalo Bills to get Trent McDuffie because that's who the Bills wanted. Then they ended up getting Kaiir Elam, which made it funny that in this particular Super Bowl, it was Kaiir Elam who was the guy getting picked on.
I do have a fun stat here, tweeted out by Database Picks. I know you don't like me saying net yards per play, but I got to say it. Since the 2001 Super Bowl, there have only been 3 teams that made the Super Bowl with a negative net yards per play differential for the season. Those guess? 3 teams went, okay, go ahead.
Since what year?
Since 2001, there's been 3 teams. No, the second half of the tweet is this Chiefs team is the 4th. So can you name the first 3?
Baltimore 1 year.
No.
Because of the defense. Ooh.
No, if the defense is good enough, they can be a positive net yard.
To make the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl?
Well, okay, so I'll it'll make it a little bit easier. All 3 of those teams won the Super Bowl.
Okay. Could it have been the Steelers with Big Ben? Because that was led mostly by, man. So it's not the Ravens. It's not the Steelers.
Nope.
Is there a New England team in there somewhere with Tom Brady?
2. Tom Brady's first Super Bowl win.
That was the defense. Willie McGinnis and all those guys.
It was the defense. It was spying on opponents' practices. My dad was a Rams fan. That was the first NFL game I ever watched. He was saying during the game, he was like, it feels like the Patriots know what the Rams are doing before the ball's even snapped.
Well, so we don't think it's going to be. We don't think it's going to be Tampa. We don't think it's going to be the Rams. We don't think it's going to be. I don't think any of the Chiefs teams. That'd be perplexing and shocking to me if that was any of the Chiefs teams.
So I said it was 2 Patriots. So it was Tom Brady's first win and Tom Brady's last win with the Patriots when they beat the Rams and then like 13-3 Super Bowl. Sterling's gone. The third team, Sterling's not going to say it, but when you think about it, it's kind of obvious. The third team to make it to the Super Bowl, you disappeared there for a second.
I got kicked out. Sean was like, I'm tired of this guy talking. I'm just going to kick him out.
So it was Patriots in Tom Brady's first Super Bowl, Patriots in his most recent Super Bowl with the Patriots when they beat the Rams in that snooze fest of the Super Bowl. Both those teams had negative net yards per play. And then it was the Giants when they upset the undefeated Patriots in 2008.
That should have been obvious.
So Tom Brady was involved in all 3 games.
That's on me. Then that was obvious.
And then this year's, because that Giants team wasn't good until the playoffs, and then went on, and then and then the Chiefs
this year.
So and like I said, all three of those teams that made it with a negative net yards per play won in the Super Bowl. The under also went 3-0 in those games. But the common theme, and this is kind of why I brought this up, the quarterback who did it twice before was Tom Brady, and Patrick Mahomes has a chance to do it. That, in my opinion, goes to show that a quarterback that has greatness, that can make big plays in big moments, in key situations, in big games, can make up for a team that may not be as skilled as the opponent that they're facing.
Agreed. And again, I know people will push back on this. Some folks will, some won't. I do think the Patriots had a little bit of that. Obviously not that first one they won, but during the regular season, why you almost coast just a little bit. I think the Chiefs maybe coasted a little bit during the regular season this year.
Yep. Yeah. 5 weeks ago, I would have argued against that. I can't argue against that anymore. I've given up that argument.
I've argued against that for a long time. Like people are like, where's the good Andy Reid plays? I'm like, come on. He's not holding these plays back. And then I'm like, okay, he might be holding some of these plays back. Like, no, he's trying to win every single game, obviously. But there might be just like a tiny little binder, a tiny little black book at the very tail end of that binder that just has a handful of important plays in it. It's the Patrick Mahomes designed runs. It's the corn dog. It's Wasp. It's that Samaje Perine, man beater, right? Where the three guys on the left go right, Samaje cuts out and takes the void. Like, there's just a handful of plays that he knows if he has to go to, it's going to work. He's going to pick up that first down.
And it's not even necessarily about being able to get up for the big games, or I guess, them getting up for the big games. It's also their calmness, because they've now played in so many big games. Like, when the camera was showing, like, Mahomes compared to Allen during that AFC Championship, you could tell Allen was nerd. Like, he felt the moment. Patrick Mahomes was like, no, I've been in these games now 20 times and I've won all of them. So, like, it's fine. I'm cool.
That first drive, you saw Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Almost threw 2 interceptions. I mean, it hit Brian Cook both times right in the hands. I mean, You could just tell that Josh Allen was amped. He calmed down and Josh Allen had himself a phenomenal game. But that first drive, you could just see the anxiety rolling through him. Patrick Mahomes is 17-3 in 20 postseason starts. 17-3.
And 2 of those losses are in overtime.
2 losses in overtime. The other one's in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It's insane. Enjoy greatness, everyone. For everyone who says refs, can you try to enjoy it? This is insane. This is ridiculous.
I push back on that. Yes, you can enjoy greatness, but I will enjoy greatness after the game. During the game, I'm going to be cheering against them. But then when the game's over, I will then, in hindsight, recognize the greatness.
100% agree. That's fine. You can root against them, but you can still appreciate. Like, I appreciate if the Bills would have won, I still appreciated what they did in these games. The 13-second game was quintessential Josh Allen. That was the definition of a fun football game. Yeah. Again, that's why I'm so irritated about this 32-29 Chiefs victory. Is this was a great game. I mean, a phenomenal game. In the talking points after are 2 plays that were borderline that people think were determined by the refs. Like, at some point, do we even like football, or do we just like to complain about it? Like, I don't know. I'm trying to get off my soapbox here. But on the Eagles side of things, I don't think Jalen Hurts, the moment gets too big for him too often. Jalen's been here in college and in the pros, right? He's been to a Super Bowl and played nearly toe-to-toe with Patrick. It was one play where he didn't get touched. He just dropped the football, right? It was just an unfortunate mishap on the biggest stage that ended up in Nick Bolton returning the ball for a touchdown. So Jalen Hurts, I don't think the moment gets too big for, which is huge for the Philadelphia Eagles, especially a team that doesn't necessarily rely on him a whole bunch. But the Chiefs' defense is one thing very, very well. They take away the other team's best weapon. What did they do against the Bills? They took away Josh Allen and his legs. They said, James Cook, go ahead. James Cook, go ahead. You're going to beat us. We know that. But you know what? We don't believe you're going to stick with it the entire game. We think you're going to say, you know what? No, let's give Josh Allen more. But we got to go more Josh. The Bills did. If they would have kept with James Cook, they'd probably win that game. It was like Baltimore last year. They stopped running the football. They said, we don't believe you. We think you're going to stop. And they did. So I think the Chiefs are going to focus really heavily on stopping Saquon Barkley. Can they stop him is a different story. But in today's NFL, you can typically do one thing. You can't take away an entire offense's entire array of weapons. The NFL's not built like that anymore. The offense is so far advanced. Plus, you typically get more, you get more calls, all that stuff. The game's designed for offense. But if you can take away one thing, Spagnuolo's going to do that. The Chiefs might just be one of the first teams to stop Saquon Barkley all season long.
Well, then that leads it's a good segue. Let's talk keys to the game, Sterling. Why don't you handle the Chiefs? A few keys for them to win, what they need to win the game, and I can take the Eagles. A few keys that I think the Eagles need to execute to win the game. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I can go first if you want to. I'll be fairly quick on this one.
Okay. Keys to the game for the Chiefs to pull off the three-peat.
Stop Saquon. If Jalen Hurts beats you, you tip your cap. Jalen Hurts is good. The Eagles are in the Super Bowl for a reason. I've been so high on them all season long. They're a damn good team. They beat you, you tip your cap and say, that was a good team. Great team. They got us. But you got to make Jalen Hurts be the guy that beats you. It cannot be Saquon. If he makes a great play and A.J. Brown comes down with it, okay, great player to a great player making a great play. That happens. It cannot be Saquon. You cannot give up that 60-yard touchdown run to start the game. You can't give up any 60-yard touchdown run in this game. Mike Pennell, hands full. Derek Nottie, Chris Jones, Mike Dana, Charles Omenihu, and George Karlaftis, keep your rush lanes. Nick Bolton's going to have a huge game, and I do think you'll probably see a good chunk of Leo Chanel. He's a great run-stopping linebacker. I think you'll see a lot more Leo in this game than maybe even in some previous games. That's where I think the key comes from. As great as Saquon Barkley is, not taking anything away from Tiger Woods right there, but this Chiefs defense doesn't miss a lot of tackles. They missed a lot against the Bills against the Bills in the regular season. I don't think they miss them in the playoffs. Get ready for some good tackling, fewer missed tackles. It's going to be a grind, I think, for Saquon.
Okay, Eagles, in my opinion, keys to victory 3. I think it comes down to 3. Number 1 is you got to start fast. The Eagles have started slow a lot this season. They've really picked it up. I think they're actually the highest scoring offense in the fourth quarter this year. In terms of points per first quarter, 5.0. And then in the fourth quarter, it's, I think, double digits. I think they're averaging 10 points per fourth quarter. Got to start fast. You can't, especially with their game plan, obviously going to be to run the ball. They run the ball at a higher percentage of plays more than any other team by like 5%. You can't give up a lead to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and then hope to be able to run the ball to make a comeback. You got to start off hot. Key number 2, time of possession. We've seen when the Chiefs in the Mahomes era loses to inferior teams, not to say the Eagles are inferior, but when they have lost to inferior teams, other teams have been able to run the ball, drain the clock, hold on to the ball for a long time, and keep Patrick Mahomes off the field. The fewer times he's on the field, the fewer opportunities he's going to be given to do Patrick Mahomes type things. The longer he can be on the sideline, the better it is for the Eagles. That means run the ball a lot. That means, listen, take the clock down to like the final 5 seconds every single time. Time of possession, I think, is going to be huge for the Eagles. Finally, number 3, which is maybe people are going to talk about it more next week, but Jake Elliott's an issue. They need to score touchdowns when they get down in Chiefs territory. They cannot win this game by kicking field goals. Not only is field goals is generally not going to beat the Chiefs anyways, but I'm not confident in Jake Elliott to even make a field goal. So when they get inside the 40-yard line of the Chiefs, they need to go down and score a touchdown. They cannot rely on Jake Elliott in this game. They should pretend like he doesn't exist. 1-6, Sean, producer Sean says 1 for 6 from 50-plus yards this season. Can't have it.
Go for 2. Honestly,
I don't hate it.
I just, and Sean says Mahomes has a perfect 8-0 record and a 10-2 touchdown to interception ratio against Fangio-led defenses. As great as Vic Fangio has been, and as much credit as a lot of times he gets for giving a hard time to Patrick, he doesn't lose to Vic Fangio, right? As great of a DC as he is, and again, we saw a lot of him in Denver, he doesn't lose to Fangio. He finds ways. He's seen Vic a whole bunch. Question for you, and maybe Sean, producer, if you want to chime in, feel free in the chat there. But I think there should be some concern with the Eagles' offensive line. It's done the same as 2022. They're banged up right now. I know Cam Jurgens is supposed to be back, correct me if I'm wrong, but with Cam and Landon Dickinson and all that stuff, there's a little bit of question mark right there. Mekhi Becton's been really, really good, but could you still take advantage of him when Chris Jones is on him? Now, I know the Eagles have a massive advantage with Jalen Carter going up against Mike Caliendo at left guard. But if you're Kansas City, could you almost exploit a slightly overblown trope of how great the Eagles' interior is? Because I do think you might be able to with the fact they are a little banged up there.
Eagles quietly gave up the second highest sack percentage in the NFL this season.
I mean, again, they're
Jalen Hurts was sacked on 9.77% of his dropbacks. That was the second most in the NFL. Only Caleb Williams and the Bears gave up more sacks per dropback.
And it's not always an offensive line stat. I get it. The quarterback has a lot to do with that as well. I understand. But I think the Eagles' offensive line is probably still top 5, but it's probably closer to 5 than 1. They were the consensus offensive line for a few years. I just think that we're kind of still stuck on that trope, that narrative, when in reality they have taken a little bit of a step back.
Well, would I be wrong in saying that they're a much better run blocking offensive line than pass blocking? Because those are two completely different skills.
No, 100% agree. I don't disagree with you there.
Right.
You are correct.
Yeah, I mean, both Josh in the chat and producer Shambo says part of the sack stat is because Hurts would rather take a sack rather than throw it in trouble. Yeah. That's an issue, though. It doesn't really matter if it's offensive line or if it's Hurts, sacks or sacks. But I guess they're kind of countering the fact that maybe, yeah, the idea.
The Chiefs' strength is Chris Jones and a little bit, to an extent, Turk Wharton up the middle. Like, I just think the Chiefs have a slight advantage. The edges will do their job. The edges of the Eagles are outstanding. But I do think the Chiefs could potentially have an advantage on the interior defensive line on pass rush situations. The issue is with the Eagles being so good at running the football, you might not see a lot of Turk Wharton, and you'll see more Mike Pennell, who's great as a run stopper, but he does not get pressure on the quarterback. So there's going to be a little bit of a cat and mouse game on how again, you're kind of correct here. If the Chiefs get up early, that's really bad for Philly if they are forced to throw the football and get out of running with Saquon.
Yeah, I thought that was the path to victory for the Commanders last week, and they weren't able to do it. I think and maybe no team can do it. Maybe the Chiefs aren't able to do it either. But that's when the Eagles get into trouble, is when they get down early.
With the Chiefs being able to stop the tush push, again, completely different with Josh Allen and the Bills, who they were actually the most efficient tush push team in the NFL this year with Josh Allen, right? Different than the Eagles, but the efficiency was there. Are you nervous if you're an Eagles fan that the Chiefs maybe have figured out a way to at least slow it down and it's no longer a guarantee?
No.
Okay.
Because no team, I don't think any team has been able to replicate it to the success the Eagles have. Especially the Bills. And I mean, the Bills did a weird thing where like Josh Allen kept like taking 2 steps to the left and then going forward.
And that's also
it didn't look anything like the Eagles tush push.
But it also is a credit to Steve Spagnuolo for understanding the tendencies.
Of course. Yeah. And so did the announcers. And then they still just kept doing it. And that, I think, as much of a credit as it is to Steve Spagnuolo, I think it's also a discredit to the Bills coaches.
To Joe Brady and Sean McDermott, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you looked at the odds for this game at all, Sterling?
No, not really. Chiefs 1.5?
Yeah, 1.5 points. But what I wanted to ask you about is the total is all the way up at 49.5. Don't you think that's pretty high for a game involving two of the better defenses in the NFL?
Yeah, and two teams who can really drain clock. The Eagles actually have been explosive running the football, right? It's wild to say a run-first team is very explosive. They are. I just don't see the Chiefs giving up a whole bunch of explosive plays personally. That's not necessarily how this defense operates. I like the under in this one, and maybe it's because folks just saw the Chiefs put up 32 against Buffalo. The last 2 times these two teams faced off in the Super Bowl, it was a very, very high-scoring game where offense was, the focal point. But at least my gut tells me right now that seems like too many points. I would take the under.
Yeah, these two teams are 2 of the top 4 teams in scoring defense this year. Eagles led the NFL, giving up to 17.9 points per game. Chiefs were 4th at 19.4 points per game. So it is, and the sharp side has been on the over because it opened at even as low as 47.5 at some places, and now it's basically 49.5 across the board, which I don't get that either. Now maybe we see another 60-point explosion, but I like the under a lot.
Is it because, and I know this is silly, are people just throwing out the regular season numbers of Kansas City and saying, yeah, we don't believe that. We saw what the
Maybe.
Chiefs just did to Buffalo. They put up 32 points. Offense looked great. They're very efficient come playoff time. I mean, I'm not trying to be a smartass here, Ian, but like, are they literally just saying, we don't care about the regular season numbers. We just think this Chiefs offense can take it to another level come postseason?
Yeah, no, sorry. That was in response to the Bills defenses. And that's why a big reason why I picked the Chiefs last week. The Bills defense kind of stunk. Like night and day between Bills defense and so I like, sorry, what I'm trying to say is the Chiefs putting up 32 points against the Bills last week is not making me think personally that now they're going to be able to put up 32 points against the Eagles.
Sure. And that's fair. It's fair.
Yeah.
I think I'm on. I think I'm on your side. I think that's far too high. You know. But same time, it's one of those situations where it's so hard to bet against Patrick, even if it's over unders, because it doesn't seem like competition affects him, which is wild to say. It really doesn't. Good defense, bad defense, he finds a way.
Yeah. And hey, maybe, you know, people who are bottom up bettors and, you know, they're originators and they're making lines, maybe they don't put much stock behind regular season numbers for the Chiefs offense. Don't know. I don't know one way or the other. Anything else you want to talk about this game before we wrap things up?
I'm just excited. I think both of these two teams are the best two teams in the NFL. You know, the Detroit Lions were there, but the amount of injuries they sustained really had them taper off. You know my thoughts on the Eagles. I think they're a phenomenal team. I really do. But you also know my thoughts on KC. I think these two teams earned the right to be here. The Eagles have been on a heater. They'd lost one game since week 4 after starting off the season 2-2. They've only lost one game since there. For all the disarray that I think people like to point out of, oh, is Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown? What's going on between those two guys? What's happening? You know, they found ways. They just keep winning. I've just been impressed by both of these teams. I think there's so many storylines post that will come out. Like as Sean says, is this the best season a running back has ever had if he breaks the all-time record in the Super Bowl? You know, if he's the Super Bowl MVP, where does this go down in the pantheon of running back seasons by Saquon? Kansas City, we obviously know nothing that's ever happened before in the history of the NFL era, the Super Bowl era, I should say, with 3 straight. There's just so much fun storylines that are transpiring from both of these two teams.
Yeah, from start to finish, I mean, it might be the best season by a running back because no running back, and I think we talked about this on Monday's show. When was the last time a running back like dragged a team, or maybe not necessarily drag because the Eagles, you know, defense plays a big role, but was the focal point of the offense and led them to a Super Bowl win. And I think we talked maybe Jamal Lewis of the Ravens.
Jamal Lewis might have been the answer. Marshawn Lynch semi, but there was still Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
Marshawn
Lynch not a bad call, but that's not to this level though.
Yeah.
And then
Sony Michel, Sony Michel in the 2017 playoffs? So that season, right, when Sony Michel had like 6 touchdowns, whatever it was, something crazy.
Super Bowl MVP. Last thing we'll talk about here. Mahomes has won it all 3 times that they have won the Super Bowl in the Mahomes era. Does he win it again? I think because I don't even know who else would win it for the Chiefs. They don't have a focal point on the offense. They don't have like a Tyreek Hill who could just blow the game wide open. They don't really run the ball all that often. When they do, they split carries.
I think it's either Patrick or it would be something like Chris Jones. If Chris Jones just had a feast on that interior offensive line of the Eagles. If there are some injuries like Landon Dickerson, I could really see Chris Jones making a massive impact. But if I'm throwing money down, I'm throwing it on Pat.
Yeah. Josh says CMC last year, but he didn't get the job done. So I think we're talking about this if the Eagles win the Super Bowl and Barkley has a big game.
Yeah, agreed.
And Barkley is second on the odds list to win Super Bowl MVP. Obviously, Mahomes is the favorite, not only because the Chiefs are favored, but it seems like it's Mahomes or anyone, whereas the Eagles, you know, obviously the quarterback's always going to be in the mix, but Saquon is plus 280. I think if you're going to bet on the Eagles, I think because Jalen Hurts didn't even throw the ball unless the Eagles get down by a lot and then Jalen Hurts has to like throw the ball a ton to like force a comeback, then yeah, but like unless that situation happens, he doesn't even throw the ball enough to win MVP. So it's like it's going to be Saquon.
What is his odds?
Saquon, I'm just looking at FanDuel right now. Saquon plus 280, Jalen Hurts plus 370.
I think if it were me, if you think the Eagles are going to win, I would put the money on Jalen.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Oh, I disagree. I was just going to say.
I told you what I think the Chiefs' defense game plan is going to be. I think it's just gonna be focused on Saquon. I really do. I think if you're gonna and let's be real, I know different team, all that 2022, but Jalen Hurts was able to have a really nice day throwing the football last time around. He might get a rushing touchdown as well. That's not out of the realm of possibility. I think if I were placing money and you think the Eagles are going to win, I would place it on Jalen.
I disagree. The Eagles run the ball 5% more than any other team in the NFL. That's been their bread and butter. Saquon has been the MVP in every playoff game for them so far. I don't see why the Super Bowl would necessarily be any different. Vish Mystery says, talk about the Birds. This is the best defense in the league. Pat hasn't seen a defense playing this. Yeah, I in terms of best defenses, in my opinion, I don't think many people would be able to argue against this. It was the Eagles, the Broncos, and the Ravens this season. Didn't get a chance to play against the Ravens since week 1, and the Ravens defense had issues early in the season. Would have really liked to see the Ravens in the AFC Championship for that reason. But yeah, I mean, the Eagles defense obviously lead the NFL in opponent points per game, lead the NFL in opponent yards per play. Third in opponent EPA per play, first in opponent success rate. This is, in my opinion, the best defense in the NFL. But when was the last time Patrick Mahomes was shut down by an elite defense? He's going to get his yards. He's going to get his touchdowns.
Yeah, that's kind
of
the
last time would have been his Super Bowl loss against the Bucs, probably. That was the last time where it's like, wow, Patrick Mahomes can't do anything.
Because the offensive line was 5 backups.
Yeah.
It was so. Yeah, no, the Eagles defense, and if you know me, I've been giving them props all year long, and Sean kind of hit me to this, where Cooper DeJean was the almost focal point of the season, where you can pinpoint when the Eagles defense really had a turnaround. It was when Cooper went into the slot. With him, Quinyon Mitchell, and Darius Slay, and Reed Blankenship, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, obviously Zach Bond, and then a really good defensive line. That defense is elite. I mean, that defense is elite. I will say the Chiefs, different defense, not elite necessarily, but the Texans had a top 5 defense this year? Close to it?
They probably would have been 5, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I would call them 5th, yeah. And Chiefs didn't put up a ton of points, but they certainly had success.
Yeah.
Any last question, any dark horse MVP that you think has a possibility for the Chiefs? Like, if you couldn't take Mahomes, you couldn't take Chris Jones, would count.
I would say Chris Jones. The only reason, because I don't know if they maybe Trent McDuffie, but he doesn't get a lot of interceptions. I don't think it'd be anyone defensively. Nick Bolton would have to have 24 tackles, and they would all be on Saquon.
Can I throw out a crazy name?
Xavier Worthy, maybe.
Xavier Worthy's 3rd on the list for the Chiefs. Crazy name, 150-1. Juju Smith-Schuster. He's been playing a lot more snaps recently. He's taken over from DeAndre Hopkins for the most part. I think he played 60% offensive snaps last week. He seems to kind of be their explosive play guy. He gets 2 in a low scoring game. He gets 2 explosive touchdowns. 150-1.
I don't like it.
No.
If it happens, I'm going to feel so bad if you don't throw anything.
I'm not going to bet it. I'm not betting it either. I'm not betting it anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Final one, just again, I know we're going to have a lot more time to talk about this, but this one from Vish says he's going to cook, no doubt. But this defense forces turnovers. Nolan and Carter are finding their groove. I don't disagree, but Patrick has had 1 turnover since, week 11? 1 turnover. It was the fumble against the Bills when he just inexplicably dropped it.
And that was the Bills' defense's biggest strength, too, was forcing turnovers, and they only got 1, so... They didn't really even force it. Mahomes
completely understand where you're coming from, but...
Yeah.
It's so hard to just count on that when you're going up against Patrick.
Yeah. All right. There you go. That has been the show. Next time that you guys, I guess we're not going to be live Monday morning. No, because I'm going to be on a flight Monday morning when we usually go live. So when is we're not doing any show Monday, so Tuesday is going to be the first time.
I would assume Tuesday. I would be shocked if we did something Monday.
Okay, so for those of you out there, subscribe to Stack in the Box on YouTube. We'll be live on Radio Row Tuesday morning, I believe 9 a.m. And we'll be live pretty much all day Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then I believe live Friday morning as well, up until about 11:30, I think.
We're gonna have fun.
Big
either way,
week
baby.
next week. It's gonna be fun. I'll be behind enemy lines in New Orleans. I gotta hide my Falcons fan. I will not be taking my AJ Terrell jersey with me. All right, thank you all so much for watching and listening. Talk to you next week, Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, right here on Stacking the Box YouTube channel. Bye. Have a good weekend.